So welcome back, a new day and another new build. This one's personal. I've actually been asked to make a large butcher block cutting board as a retirement gift for a guy that I've worked with and known for nearly 2 decades. Mr. K has supported me at the beginning of this journey, buying one of the first cutting boards I made, and he's also been a great supporter of the channel, so this one is for you. So for this one I'm actually going to use an oak, but the prices of new oak are quite steep. I've stumbled across this pallet of whiskey barrel staves being listed as firewood and possibly to be used from crafting. I'm hoping that we can get some usable stock from this. So I've shelled out just under 200 of your finest English pounds for this 1 cubic metre of staves. There's about 300 in total in there. Many of them are charred, some are in better conditions than others, but we'll sort them out and see what we've got. So here we're actually just taking out the middle part of the stave, the part that has the biggest bow in it, and then the ends where the barrel lids would normally sit. There's a bit of a lip there that I won't be able to flatten out. So what's left is the outside lengths. They're actually reasonably straight and flat, but there is a noticeable bow across both the width and then down the remaining length. Hopefully they won't need many passes on the planer to be able to get a nice flat surface. The planer I actually have is only an entry level unit, the cheapest one I could find at the time when I was starting out on my woodworking journey. It's actually not a tool I use too much of on a day-to-day basis, and subsequently the blades are in pretty bad shape, a bit rusted over, and they need to be swapped out before I get into planing each of these pieces. So new blades installed, grab myself first piece of oak, and we are ready to go make a bit of sawdust here. This first piece, hopefully you can see, has got some cracks on the surface. Let's see what lies beneath. So after the first couple of passes, we're just taking off all the high spots at the ends of these staves. Starting to see that lovely oak colour coming through. A few more passes and we're slowly getting through all of that charred wood and these splits. So this whole process to flatten these 10 trays took a good hour or so. Some needed a few passes, some took a little bit more for various reasons, either because there were splits in the surface or the charring was a little bit deeper on some pieces than the others. But I just wanted to come back here as to the sold as firewood. With a little bit of work, we've started to reveal this beautiful oak grain and colour, and I'm pretty sure everything's going to work out from here on. So the next step in our butcher blocks journey is squaring up each of these sides. This is where the first glue up joints are going to be, so ensuring that each of these are square is kind of critical. We don't want any spaces appearing later on. So all the pieces are cut and I've sorted them into their different thicknesses. The next stop will be to go over to the thicknesser to clean up the other sides. So this next part of the build took by far the longest amount of time, having to pass each of these pieces of wood through the thicknesser to level up the other side. In hindsight, I should have just used the table saw to take the majority off the top surface and then use the thicknesser to apply the last few cuts. Would have saved me a massive amount of time, would have saved a bit of wear and tear on my blades, and also the amount of sawdust I created, which was somewhere around 4 lots of that 80-litre barrel you can see on the right. But as a result, now we've got these 12 baskets of beautiful oak ready for glue up. And talking of glue, Type Bond 3 is the glue of choice for me on this build. I've double checked it is food safe, so good for chopping boards, but it's not the cheapest on the market. I've always found that the bonding has been really good and never had a problem with it yet. So a quick clamp up, a couple of days for them to set and then back out of the clamps. Each of these boards is approximately 30 centimeters wide and about 65 centimeters long. They're actually going to be going through the thicknesser again to get a lovely smooth surface on both sides. In the end, we had a total of about 17 centimeters total thickness, and providing I can get approximately 3 cuts from each of the sheets, we should get our board depth of around 50 centimeters. So everything's been cut and I've got just over 50 centimeters depth for the board that I was looking for. I've mixed up all of these different cuts so that we've got a nice random pattern through the board, and I'm ready for the next phase of the glue up. I'm actually having to glue these in 2 sections just so they're small enough to fit back through the thicknesser later on. So back into the clamps and another couple of days drying, and we've now got 2 halves of our cutting board. We can see that glue squeeze out, which is good to see, and we're just going to use a scraper to remove those little beads ready for it to go back through the thicknesser. Now these black marks that you can see are actually because my pipe clamps reacted with the glue. But when we put them through the thicknesser, they should hopefully all be removed and not leave any marks. So I'm just taking really light cuts here to take off these surface marks, and it's fair to say my thicknesser and extraction are really starting to struggle here. I suspect this is going to need a service in the not so distant future. So the final glue up of the two halves, and at this point I realised how heavy this thing's actually going to be. It isn't going to slide around the worktop, that is for sure. So I'm on to my least enjoyable job, sanding. First time is with this electric sander using a coarse 80 grit, just to remove any marks left over from the thicknesser or any stubborn glue that hasn't been removed yet. They will be sanded again with the orbital sander later on. So trimming up the sides was actually not that easy. The weight of this board made pushing it through not the simplest job, and left a few scratch marks and scorch marks on the side, which I'll have to sort out later when I do the second sanding. So it's out with this little router that I have to be able to cut out the finger slots. We're going about an inch deep, which should give us plenty of clearance for being able to get hold of this monster board. The last little job for the router is just to put a round over on the top of the board all the way around, just so when we come to sanding we won't have any sharp edges and it should look absolutely stunning. So sanding round 2, we're going to use an 80 grit and then onto 120 grit on the surfaces, and then a little bit of hand sanding in some of the harder to reach areas and around the finger slots. Personally, I don't like over sanding the boards. I like to be able to feel the grain and not to have a totally shiny surface. So for anybody who's ever made a chopping board, this is the bit you can't wait for, adding the oil. We're just going to be applying this mineral oil to start with. This will likely need a couple of applications as this wood is so dry, but this is the first time I started to get a feel for the colour of the oak and see all the different parts of it. Firewood it is not. A stunning butcher block it very nearly is. So the next day, after applying 2 lots of the mineral oil, I get to see what it looks like. It has fully soaked up all of the oil and we're ready to move on to the wax and oil finish. So before I finish this board off, I really want to know how much it weighs. And sod's law, my scales max out at 10 kilograms, so I've no idea at this point. Now, after actually giving it to Mr. K, he did get in touch to let me know he had weighed it, and it came in at an impressive 18.5 kilograms total weight. So the last job here is to apply my own mix of beeswax and mineral oil, just using a small gas torch to heat up the oil, which I think helps me apply it a little bit easier. So in one of my first videos, I actually made an oak end grain cutting board out of an old worktop. I still use it every day, but to give you an idea of the difference in size, it absolutely dwarfs my board. I love the colours of this, I love the residual staining from the whiskey, and I love the fact that it's not uniform. There's different thicknesses, different widths running throughout this board, and I think it makes it look absolutely stunning. So there you have it, firewood saved from the fire, turned into this monster 18.5 kilogram butcher block, something that should last an absolute lifetime and hopefully is used every day of your retirement. But as always, many thanks for watching. I always appreciate any comments, recommendations you've got for other builds, or if you like, just click that subscription button. See you soon.